You think I'm clickbaiting, aren't you? Well, I'm not. This video is going to deliver exactly what the title says. But before we begin, we have to give a little bit of context. You see, The Guardian released an article talking about a guide to spot far-right extremism has been sent to schools in England and Wales. So it's very interesting. Like, why particularly far-right extremism? Like, why not all extremism? Why limit it to the far right? And why just specifically extremism? Like, why not a guide to make sure that your kids don't start drinking? Or that they don't start skipping school or other problems that society can face with? Well, it's because the people who made this guide are the charity of Hope Not Hate. Now, despite the fact that it has the name of charity, and you would be thinking that these are individuals who like to go around and feed the poor, give soup to the homeless, try to save dying children from cancer. All of these things, while noble in nature, they're not very progressive. Okay, like progressive things is about talking on social issues, like saying the correct things is what's progressive. Now, what I've said up till now, it's good if it's done, but it's not as important as fighting hate. That is the pillar of any decent society. Now, if you look at the people who are members of Hope Not Hate, you will notice that some of them are self-proclaimed Marxists and communists. Now, this is not an insult. I mean, in Eastern Europe it is, because communism and Marxism has brought immense pain and suffering to a lot of people in Eastern Europe, which is why both fascism, Nazism, and communism are banned by law. They're considered to be violent and extreme ideologies that cannot cohabitate with a liberal democracy. But in the United Kingdom, that doesn't seem to be the case. And I assume it's because the United Kingdom never had the pleasure of experiencing communism at a nationwide scale in order for people to realize why it's not such a good idea when you think that private property isn't important. And you can just go around and just take the private property away from people. People often defend the private property, and when they defend it, well, they're attacking, so you can defend yourself now against the people, right? And like a lot of discussions about it. But what I'm trying to say with this is that the members of Hope Not Hate, by being self-proclaimed communists, they are of a very far left-leaning ideology and a far left-leaning mindset. And on top of that, they also have connections with journalists and politicians and activists of the left. I've never heard once Hope Not Hate say a good thing about a conservative. So I'm not talking about the far right, okay? I'm talking about like an average Tory, an average modern conservative. I've not heard Hope Not Hate say, okay, this is the good type of conservative. Like, this is the type of person that we want to promote. The reason they don't do this is because they are a left-leaning agitating group. Okay, like their purpose is to convince you to vote Labour or to vote something that is more left than Labour. That is their purpose. They are not a group of concerned citizens that have just arrived on the scene and don't like political extremism. They use far-right extremism as a vector in order to convince people to vote left-leaning. That is their purpose. Right? And when you understand it, a lot of the things that we're going to be discussing here make sense. And these people use a lot of tactics, some of them savory, some of them not. Like, for example, if there is a right-wing person on Facebook or a politician that is becoming a little bit too uncomfortable for Labour, then they will go to that politician's social media. They will come through thousands of lines of text, or they would watch video footage of interviews at YouTube channels and whatever. And then they would take things out of context, they would mash them up, they would create something that they would then pass it along to their friends that work at left-leaning publications like The Guardian. And then The Guardian would make an article saying, here's a person you've never heard about, and this is why you need to hate them. And then say, like, look what evil things this person said out of context. And the idea is for social media to then ban that person, to silence the reach of rival politicians, of rival activists, or of anyone that's a problem to Labour. That is the purpose of Hope Not Hate. So now that you understand this, you can understand why they're going to schools. Because they want to make sure that the children from schools, when they get the right to vote, they vote properly. They vote labor, even though they haven't labored a day in their life. But what does labor have to do with labor anyway? Anyway, Charity has issued guidance to schools about spotting far-right extremism. Right? So that's why they don't care about extremism in general. And this type of guides used to exist in the past. It's like, make sure that your kid isn't a Satanist. This is what Satanists do. They listen to goth music. They play heavy metal. They leave their hair long if they're a boy, or they dress in black. And these are signs of worrying extremism. Like, these used to exist, but I think they used to exist more in the United States than they had in Britain. But, you know, like, I'm used to these types of pamphlets, basically. But here's something that I want people to understand, okay? When I grew up, the society told kids that Harry Potter is evil because it causes magic, which caused people to watch Harry Potter, made it popular. Society told people that rock music is evil, which caused people to really like rock music. Now society is warning people about going on 4chan and spreading memes on the internet. What do you think the answer is going to be? Probably different, because now it's a lot more easy to monitor people. We got the technology to do it. But anyway, back to the story at hand. Why is Hope Not Hate sending a safeguarding guide for safety? The reason they do it is because of the authoritarian mindset. The mindset of the extremist. And the extremist, both on the left and the right, they believe that people, and I'm not talking about children, I'm talking about adults. Adults are incredibly dumb, okay? They treat adults like children that do not have the mental capacity to take decisions. As such, decisions have to be taken for them. And what I mean by this is, in the case of the leftist extremists, they believe that you do not know how to spend your money. So the government should spend the money for you by taxing you as much as possible and then redistributing the wealth in a proper way, a way that you, P-brain, is incapable of thinking on how to spend your own wealth. They also think that you are incapable of raising your children. And as such, is the responsibility of society to raise the kids for you, either the government or corporations like social media. And this is exactly what's happening here. They justify that because of the lockdown, kids have been away from school. And as such, how can children be educated if they don't stay at school and instead they stay with their bigoted parents locked in their home? Like, who's going to provide that education if the child is at home with his parents, locked up, away from school? Kids just do not get educated that way, especially, I mean, they can go on the internet, heaven forbid. They might access information that is heretical in nature. They might end up voting for a Tory. Oh no, oh Dios mío. Imagine if they vote for the Tories, anything but that. So, because of this, they decided it's time for action. So, they're going to now release this pamphlet because earlier this month, a teenage leader of a neo-Nazi group was convicted for terrorism offenses that began at age 13. Now, I want to say that this is horrible, okay? Any extremism, left-leaning, right-leaning, Islamic, I don't care, okay? Should be condemned. And in this case, justice seems to have been done. A judge has convicted the teenager. But it's a country of 60 million people, isn't it? As far as I know, maybe I'm wrong. Doesn't the United Kingdom have like 60 million people or something? So in a country of 60 million people, you're telling me about one? That's a good fucking statistic, isn't it? Again, like, even one person is a bit too much, but like, if out of 60 million people, one is a problem, then it's not an overreaching problem now, is it? I would consider, like, unless you can show me more cases and you can show me a statistic, then it is not an issue. Like, imagine if I were to say, out of 60 million people, one wins the lottery. Would you buy a lottery ticket then? Would you feel lucky if you did? Would you think that your chances are high? Now again, like, maybe this is a more overarching issue, but the thing that they're presenting, I can't even call it cherry picking. It's the nut fallacy. Like, you manage to just pick the most extreme case in order to make a point. No, like, go back, come with a statistic, a study, show me what the experts are saying, huh? And then have a convincing argument. But they're not trying to have a convincing argument. They're trying to have an emotional argument. And then the article talks about one Owen Jones. Owen Jones is a political activist that is promoting labor. So again, like, these people aren't neutral. Like, they're not concerned citizens. They're not some mothers that all of a sudden are like, okay, this is a problem, we need to fix it. No, like, they are political agitators. And I'm going to hammer this point in because it's very important. And by the way, I would be worried if actual Nazis would come to my child's school to warn them about the dangers of far-left extremists and communists. Because if they want to use that as a vector to get themselves in power, then that's also a problem. I don't think there is a choice between Hitler and Stalin, basically. I think Winston Churchill is someone we should promote. And the communists hate Winston Churchill. But, like, these are a little bit more nuanced conversations, which is why the left tries to turn the world into black and white. Like, either you're with Stalin or you're with Hitler. There is no third option. There is no United States. There is no Britain. You need to choose what type of authoritarian flavor you want. Who do you want to hold the yoke? Who do you want to oppress you? Do you want class oppression or race oppression? Pick your poison, buddy. It's like, no, I reject. But anyway, here's the material. It's called Safeguarding Guide to Online Hate. And it's a lot to read. They talk about different signs. And of course, not a single sign is about left-leaning extremism. And some of the signs, by the way, like, some of the signs are legit. Like 100% legit Nazi symbols. Like, if you would catch your kid having those in his room, you would start raising some questions, because then you might think, okay, well, if he is straying down this path, he might end up in a prison cell, and I don't want my kid going there, okay? So I get that. But then they also have things like the okay hand gesture. And I want to remind people that this insanity is actually leading to people getting fired, or video game developers like removing the okay sign from Mortal Kombat. I mean, a game where you can decapitate people. But hey, even leftists do the okay sign. Why are they getting canceled? Are they white supremacists now? Like, the okay sign has been done since before I was born. It always meant okay. Just because a couple of people want to troll the left now and be like, these people are so unhinged and they're looking for racism everywhere, to the point if we can convince them that if enough people do the okay sign with a different connotation, they are going to attack even people that don't use it with a different connotation. Intent doesn't even matter. And I don't think like they consider the sign offensive, because again, when a leftist does it, they don't freak out about it. It's perfectly fine. They can do it. But when a random average Joe that's probably political neutral does it, they get fired. Or they're told to stop it. Or they're being told, like, hey, remove this from the video game. Remove it from the video game because it's dangerous. It's a heretical symbol. You're casting dark magic by doing it. It's got juju vibes. But anyway, right, so here we go. With page 27, you get Sargon of Akkad, when he was a little bit more plump. And you get Milo Yiannopoulos. Now, I don't know why they picked Milo Yiannopoulos. I mean, he doesn't seem to be as influential since he got canceled. And he got canceled by the right, by the way. So let's see what they're on about. Okay, why is Milo Yiannopoulos, a gay Jewish man married with a black husband, dangerous for children? Because it's identity politics. It's very important, the identity of a person, right? This is a wide ideological variation within the far right. And by the way, they don't define what far right is. It's not Nazism, because then they would say it. Like, we don't know what far right is. I can define what far right is, and I can define what far left is. But I don't think they want to define it specifically to leave it ambiguous to the point where they can name anyone that they want far right. So the question would be like, who would they consider to be just right wing? Because I never heard, and please show me the opposite. Like, if such an article exists, I would love to see it. I would love to see if Hope Not Hate considers a single politician to just be right wing. It's like, okay, they're not far right, they're just right wing. Like, because to them, everyone on the right of Stalin, even centrists, and even moderate leftists seem to be far right. I'm legitimately curious, right? So it's just a slander term. It's just like bad person. Like, if you read far right as bad person, then it makes sense. It doesn't have to be a dangerous person. It's just like a bad person. Again, I'm willing to change my mind if I'm being shown the opposite. Like, show me who does Hope Not Hate consider to just be basic right-wing people. Probably the Queen, huh? Or no, because she's apolitical. Okay. But I think we've managed to find the closest thing to a definition that we can possibly get. So there are far-right activists who shy away from issues of race and direct their efforts against progressive movements. So in other words, you can be far-right without being a racist. And anything that's against a progressive movement as such must be far-right. But the reason you have conservatives is because they like society and don't want it to change. Like, that's how democracy works in Europe. You get progressive movements which are pushing for reform when they win elections. And then you get the conservatives which keep the reforms that make people happy and dial back the reforms that are a little bit too extreme. This has been the case for the last 50 years. And it's how Europe has constantly moved through democracy. The idea that anyone that is against a progressive movement is a bad person is an extremist point of view. You are left-leaning extremists. You are indoctrinating children into believing that any conservative is a bad person. And then the definition, just so you can understand, right? Like, criticizing ideas such as LGBTQ plus rights and feminism and those that formulate their issues as critiques against religion, usually Islam, rather than a group of people such as Muslims. Okay, so if I understand this correctly, there are a couple of social constructs such as Islam, feminism, LGBT rights, which should be above criticism. Like, if you criticize these, even if you do it in a non-violent way and you're having constructive criticisms, you're a bad person. You're far right. So if we look at the United Kingdom, one of the most renowned feminists, worldwide renowned, I would say, is J.K. Rowling. She got cancelled by the left. She got far more than criticism. She got death threats by the left. Does that mean that the left is bad people because they're criticizing feminism? Or what is feminism now? Is she feminisming wrong? Is her version of feminism incorrect? Can you criticize corporate feminism then? Is corporate feminism right? If I were to say I'm a second wave feminist and I disagree with the version of corporate feminism that's being pushed, who gets to decide what type of feminism is okay and what isn't, so that we know which one we should and shouldn't criticize? Muslims and LGBT rights. One of the biggest marches that happened, I believe 2 years ago, was with Muslim parents protesting about the fact that LGBT was being promoted in their schools and they didn't want their children there. Are Muslims now far right? I mean, I would agree because, you know, it's a conservative religion, so they are for hierarchy, right wing. They're certainly not left leaning. And by Hopes Not Hate implied definition, anything that's not left leaning is far right. But apparently we shouldn't criticize them either, because that would make us far right. So really, Hope Not Hate, you have absolutely no criticism of Islam, like none whatsoever. There isn't a single thing, not with Muslims, but with Islamic ideology that you say, okay, I disagree with it. Because if there isn't a single thing, then why aren't you a Muslim? Because certainly, like, you must believe that Allah is real, and thus you should try to save your soul. I mean, I as an atheist criticize all religions, but apparently people cannot be atheists anymore without being far right. Like, literally every single atheist, including Marxists, I suppose, by this logic should be far right. If they're not, they're criticizing at least Islam, and therefore they're far right. But not only that, okay? Macron, Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, Vive la France, he criticizes Muslims. There is literally not a single thing that Sargon has said about Islam that Macron hasn't said it as well by now. So is Macron now far right? Is France being led by extremists? If only Macron's mother had access to this pamphlet, She could have seen the signs. She could have stopped it before it has happened. So because they avoid explicitly mentioning race or endorsing violence, in other words, they're not doing anything wrong. Like they're actually following the rules. But the problem is that leftist extremists do not want a democratic society. They want a society of unity and healing, when everyone votes for the left and supports leftist causes. Kind of like fascism, if you think about it. That's the whole point. Nothing outside the state, nothing against the state, everything within the state. There is harmony. Any person that dissents is a problem. So you're pointing to Milo and Sargon and you're saying these people are not racist. They're not talking about race. They're not encouraging people to violence. But the problem is that we don't like what they have to say. And they're an issue. We can't really articulate why they're an issue, but they are. That's literally the pamphlet. That's literally their argument. And because of this, apparently they cater to very large and often relatively young audiences on social media. I don't think that's the case. I don't think Milo or Sargon has shared their demographics, but I would be surprised if school kids are the main demographic of people who consume political content on YouTube. Because I know from my demographics, they're not children. I mean, some of you might be, like some of you might be like 16, 17, but overwhelmingly no. It's the smallest demographic. The biggest demographic that I have is between 25 and 35 years old. And I think I have a granny as well that's like 85. God bless her soul. But other than that, no, like the biggest chunk of demographic is not kids. I'm pretty sure like Vosh might have more kids than me, simply because his content is edgy. Like communists are allowed to make edgy content on YouTube and kids are attracted to that. If I try to be edgy, I would have Hope Not Hate make a video about me, send it to The Guardian. But anyway, we got other more mainstream figures cannot strictly be considered far-right, but use arguments and tropes that often stray into the far-right territory. Okay, so what makes Ben Shapiro not far-right, but Sargon is? Like, listening to them both, I don't think Sargon has a single view that is more extreme than what Ben Shapiro is saying. Like, I would love to understand why. I think the only reason they're doing this is because Ben Shapiro is mainstream and everyone knows him. And he's got the backing of corporations behind him, and he's got more wealth and more money. So there's that level of prestige. You can't really go after him. You can't really slander him with anything. He's got a big microphone. I think that's why they're like, oh yeah, well, Ben Shapiro isn't really far right, but he delves into the far right witchery. So why is Ben Shapiro a problem? Well, apparently, Ben Shapiro has 2.4 million subscribers on YouTube and occasionally makes appearances in mainstream media outlets. While their ideas are often deeply offensive, everyone that follows them cannot be said to be on a path for radicalization or extreme or organized elements of the far right. Some people consume this material only to later move away from it. So it's the audience retention that's the problem, I guess. I don't know where they get their data or stats from, but I suppose their thinking is that while Ben Shapiro is not a radical according to them, the people who watch him move away from him, and thus he is not a problem. Unlike Carl Benjamin, who has audience retention, and that's what makes him an extremist. Because by existing, he is preventing people from voting Labor. I suppose, like, if what I'm making sense from this, because I can't see where Shapiro and Sargon would disagree, like on what issue they would fight swords with, and Sargon would hold a more extremist view than Shapiro. And like that view is so unacceptable that it leads people to radicalization. In my opinion, like both of them have similar ideologies. Like I'm willing to be wrong on this, but I just don't know. Like, please explain to me in the chat where you guys think that they disagree on, and why do you think like Sargon holds the more extreme view? But what is the problem? So the problem with people that are listening to Sargon is that they start criticizing The importance of political correctness. Oh my God, we can't have that. And the importance of gender equality. I don't think Sargon ever said that genders shouldn't be equal under the law, but this is not what they mean, and we're going to see in a little bit. Okay, now what I'm about to read to you is going to send your sides into orbit. So trust me when I say that if you're listening to this on a phone, you should sit down. Because what I'm going to just say now is going to release the Joker's laughing gas, and it's going to make you have like the biggest grin on your face while you're going to try to wake up from this genjutsu. You're going to be like, this can't be real. Like, are kids being taught this? Yes. Charity organization. So the problem with these activists, like Sargon, Milo, and Ben Shapiro, they avoid issues of biological racism and violence. However, they promote a central premise of most far-right ideologies. And one of these premises, like Ben Shapiro, for example, and Carl Benjamin, argue for decisive biological differences between men and women. So if you think that there are biological differences between men and women, you're a far-right bigot, motherfucker. So I'm willing to question that if I go on the street right now, like right now I go on the street and I ask, are there differences between men and women? And I ask 1,000 people, what do you think the responses I'm going to get? Oh my God, it's a far-right infestation, isn't it? Why is it then? No, seriously, hope not hate. Please enlighten me, okay? Why is it that the Olympics segregate sports based on men and women? Do you want to put a woman with Mike Tyson in a ring? If there are no biological differences, or significant ones, then you should say yes. Honestly, if you organize a private event where you put Mike Tyson against the world's strongest woman, I would pay money to see that. I would definitely be entertained. I would think like, okay, no, this is something worth watching. You know, history is in the making. But I personally would advise against that. Now, just because there are differences doesn't mean that the law shouldn't apply equally to both. I think both men and women should have equal protection under the law. That is the liberal mindset. The mindset that there is absolutely no difference, and as such, there is no reason to segregate sports, for example, or to create, I don't know, women-only gyms, or women hair salons, or anything that segregates. Is there no difference? Why do we segregate? Why do we have women's bathrooms? Like, okay, just remove them. Fine. You know, like if this is the, I don't want to be far right. Just tell me what to think, and I'll think it. But anyway, they also lie about Sargon of Akkad, because they say here there are inherent somehow natural or biological differences between groups of people that cannot be overcome. Okay, like they manipulate, because never have I heard Sargon say that there is a biological difference that cannot be overcome between races or anything like that. The only thing that they say is that, yes, there is a biological difference between men and women. And every nation in the world throughout human history has recognized this difference. And if you want to say that every nation in the world is far right, okay. Okay, I mean, it's only recently in a couple of Western countries that you have people denying that there's a difference. But I'll tell you what, I don't think women themselves deny that there's a difference. It's why it's not okay for a man to ever hit a woman. Why is it that, right? Why is it not okay for a man to ever hit a man? Like, no one says that. Or a woman can hit a man. Not advisable, but it's not as taboo as a man hitting a woman. Why is that if there's no difference? I'm probably far right myself, huh? I'm on the levels of evil Ben Shapiro now. Just as bad. But anyway, so they're saying that this is one as harmful as it justifies racism and discrimination. Okay, Sargon never said this. And I don't think Milo Yiannopoulos said it either. I find it difficult to believe that the gay Jewish man married with a black husband thinks that we should discriminate based on race. Yiannopoulos has, for example, argued to remove voting rights for women. Okay, that's Yiannopoulos being dumb, all right? But here's the difference between the left-leaning mindset and the right-leaning mindset. I can listen to a person and disagree with some of the things they say. Like, I have a mind and the information comes through my mind and I filter it. And I don't think that Milo Yiannopoulos is going to manage to change the way we live in our society, to change the American Constitution, for example, in order to take away women's rights to vote. I don't see him as a danger. If you want to live in a democracy, you're going to have people with cuckoo ideas. You're going to have people that say, we need to start living in the forests. You're going to have people that say we need to start eating vegan. You're going to have people with ideas you disagree with, if you want a democracy. If you want fascism, then yes, these people cannot exist. And you need to differentiate between ideas that are harmless and ideas that are harmful. I don't think Milo Yiannopoulos saying a stupid thing is going to convince and create this movement that shapes the very foundations of society and takes women's rights to vote away. And if it does, I would be the first to speak against it. Like I would be the you shall not pass guy on the bridge. But I love how they manipulate the wording, okay? Because Milo said something, then Sargon is also guilty, as well as Ben Shapiro. Now, you should head over to the Glossary and give it a read, because it's incredibly funny and amusing. And some of the things are legit. Like, some of the things, if you see a person saying them, you could actually say, okay, well, this guy probably spins in far-right circles. It's like seeing a guy doing the heavy metal hand signs and has long hair and he's got a t-shirt with a band on. You know, like, okay, like if you see people doing these things, chances are they might be part of a community. But you also have like things that are ambiguous, like cultural Marxism. I've seen that term being used in mainstream media. It's not very accurate, but it's the same like trickle-down economics. Reagan never had coined the term trickle-down economics. Like, that is a leftist concept in order to mock and ridicule his economic plan. And it's the same thing with cultural Marxism. It's like to ridicule what it is, because it's not really the same thing as classical Marxism. It's a lot more difficult to go into, but, you know, like this, just because someone uses that term doesn't mean they're an extremist or anything like that. But then you have like terms that are completely bewildering, and like you read them and you don't understand them. So alpha male, beta male apparently is misogynistic now. So if you call someone a beta male, you're insulting a man, but you're committing misogyny. The alpha male, beta male paradigm. What if like you get a biologist talking about the alpha wolf? Is he a far-right extremist now? Is he being misogynistic towards the wolves, huh? How does it work? So apparently these terms are used to refer to stereotypical notions of manhood and strength that are commonly found on the far right and the manosphere, although the term alpha male also refers to the widespread use in society at large. Also, so there's difference in far-right notions of gender norms. Oh my God, if you believe in gender norms, like Japan does, or India does, or Romania does, or Hungary does, okay? All these nations have gender norms because they are hives of far-rightiness. So if you believe in gender norms, an alpha male is one who demonstrates traditional notions of masculinity, while a beta male is one who perceived as weak and undesirable. Like, okay, there are stereotypes, but are they wrong? I mean, let's look at a stereotype. Women aren't attracted to perverts. So if I see a creep, a guy that likes to sniff the chair where his crush has previously sat in, he cannot take his eyes off of cleavage and starts drooling. When he talks with a woman, her eyes are never up here. Is it safe to assume that that guy would not be desirable? I mean, he is not acting the way a proper man should act. If I tell him this, is it wrong? I mean, I'm basing this on stereotypes. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the guy is incredibly popular with the girls. But if I see someone acting in that way, I will automatically assume that because of his behavioral patterns and because of the stereotypical notions that I have about what women are being put off by, it's not something that he should continue if he actually wants to improve in life. And I don't think like telling that guy, hey, you should be yourself. You should be yourself. You know, you're not doing anything wrong. We're saying about a guy that's not hurting anyone, right? Like, but he's acting like a creep. And I'm telling him, it's like, maybe you should change. Am I hurting him because I'm trying to push him into social constructs in the proper way he should behave? Like, what if the next day he actually meets a woman that is into that shit, and she would be very attractive? It would be like his soulmate. But because of my intervention, I have now pushed him on the wrong path. If I tell a man, you should look at how Owen Jones behaves. Owen Jones, the person who wrote in The Guardian from the Hope Not Hate, yeah. You should look at how Owen Jones behaves and try to copy that. I'm not kidding. Like, Owen Jones displays a lot of masculine characteristics. Like, I saw the way he walks. I look at the way he dresses. There's a video with some working lads hounding him. Owen Jones doesn't give a fuck. Like, he just laughs it off because he has confidence. He's displaying confidence in his abilities. He knows he's above those lesser working class lads. He is labor. Working class lad. But he behaves in a way that is attractive for women. Like, women like that in a man. They like to see that he's got confidence, and when he is challenged, he doesn't go like, oh, please don't hurt me, working lad. Oh, I'll do anything you say. If he did that, then he would lose respect. But apparently it's wrong to say it, huh? Maybe it's like Owen Jones pushing the ladder for everyone else. It's like, don't act like him, because he's into toxic masculinity, the way he walks without a care in the world, and the confidence that he has. Like that guy from BBC. You know, that guy from BBC that was in the documentary, I forgot which, that went to a restaurant and ordered all the expensive champagne and all the expensive wine. And you know what he did? He brought his dog there into the restaurant. Why? Because he's got a big cock and he works for the BBC and he can actually do that. He can bring his dog wherever he wants. Women like that shit. You know? But apparently if I say that, it's misogynistic. If I tell other men, it's like, hey, look, I'm not an expert. I'm not Dr. Love, but I managed to seduce a couple of women. Like, what worked for me maybe works for you. Maybe you should act it this way if you want to, find a soulmate. No, that's misogynistic. How dare you? How dare you? Yes, men should act however they like. Okay, there is no reason to act in any way. And the idea that women like tall men with strong jawlines that are confident and broad shoulders, those are stereotypes, and stereotypes are bad. Yes. Which is why we made that entire article explaining stereotypical behavior on how you can label a person far right. The humor is not lost on the visit. If you like this, please let me know in the comment section. Please share this video around. And if you really like it, I would appreciate a donation, a super chat or something. And I will see you guys in the comment section.